Good evening, everyone. Today, in our cycle of seminars and conferences, Mohamed Abdul Aziz is our welcome guest. He is attending the doctoral course at our university, and actually he is writing his thesis, but also articles that he is producing from the temi, or from the argomenti of his thesis. And then thank you, Mohamed, for accepting our invitation. And it's better if you introduce yourself, because my English is always my English. Thank you very much.
Oh, you are welcome. Thank you so much. I am very pleased to be here today in this conference. So I am Muhammad Abdul Aziz, PhD students at Polenzo University. I basically belong to Pakistan. I did my educational background is botany, plant science, and I did my master in 2000 to 2012 from Guwahati University of Science and Technology. And in 2015, I did my MPhil from the same university. So after completing my MPhil studies, I carried out some field research in medical ethnobotany, and I got some publications about medicinal plants. So in 2015, I started writing articles about medicinal plants of Pakistan. I was working with different indigenous and local communities in West Pakistan. And then during the process of publication, I got interaction with Professor Pironi. So because you know that Professor Pironi is the editor-in-chief of Journal of Ethnobiology and Ethnomedicine. So we were like we got interaction with each other. So he told me about gastronomy, the university. He told me about the slow food. And then in 2017, I was like hired as a science teacher in Pakistan. So from 2017 to 2018, I served at a school as a senior science teacher. And then I got a PhD scholarship in 2018. And now my research area is North and West Pakistan. So before COVID arrived, I was planning to do research in the adjacent area of Wahan, that is part of Afghanistan, and also across the boundary in Tajikistan. But since like COVID arrived, so we changed our plan, and now I am just focusing North and West Pakistan. My research project is basically split into two parts. The first part is the documentation of traditional ecological knowledge on wild food plants among different linguistic and religious communities. And the second part is about educational, it's like more about education. And I am trying to envision and investigate the different opportunities, the different ways that how traditional ecological knowledge could be brought to actual educational practices, to actual classroom practices, not just in theory, but as well as in practice. So now I think it was like my short and brief introduction. I want to take you to the slides. I think you can see the screen.
Yes.
Now.
Yes, it's perfect.
So today, okay. So today we are going to discuss briefly how traditional ecological knowledge can like counter the effects of global extinction crisis. So first of all, we need to understand that what is traditional knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, or traditional environmental knowledge. Well, it is a accumulated body of knowledge which is passed or transferred from one generation to another generation. So this knowledge is transferring from one generation to another generation, but it changes with the change in time and space. Because the social ecological systems are changing. So traditional ecological knowledge is also changing. The traditional ecological knowledge may be plant related knowledge, animal related knowledge, knowledge on climate, knowledge on archaeology, and knowledge about the ecosystem management. We use different terms like ethnobotany, ethnozoology, ethnoarchaeology, uh, ethnoclimatology. So these are the different terms we used, but basically traditional ecological knowledge is not a like a static entity. It is a mutating complex. So it is a mutating complex because when it transferred from one generation to another generation, it changes, and the structure and composition of the traditional ecological knowledge is not remain the same. So it constantly changing because local communities are trying to adjust themselves according to the changing socio-ecological systems. So in ethnobiology, we use a term, biocultural refuge. So what does it mean, biocultural refuge? Biocultural refuge, these are those landscapes which not only shelter biodiversity, but these are also places which have strong traditional knowledge. Like these places are populated, are inhabited by those communities that have strong knowledge about ecosystem management, and they are producing food. That's why we use biocultural refuge. It's like the mixture of biodiversity plus culture. So these people, when distance becomes a barrier for food, so what these people that are living in those places, in those landscape, they are capable to produce their own food. So in ethnobiology, we use biocultural refuge, and we can say that these are the hotspots for biocultural diversity. Now, when we are talking about extinction crisis, so it reminds us just about biodiversity, that biodiversity is facing extinction crisis. But I would like to tell you that the three diversities of life, like linguistic diversity, cultural diversity, and biodiversity, they are together facing extinction crisis. And I would suggest that uh, uh, Yusa Mafi, she is an Italian. She is the founder of a foundation, Terra Lingua. So she has worked a lot on the relationship of these three diversities of life: language, culture, and biodiversity. So they have like very close relationship. You can see in the conceptual diagram that if one of the diversity is going to separate from the rest of the two, so the life would be collapsed. So that's why, because language has a very strong relationship with a culture. For example, culture, each culture has specific knowledge like specific about since knowledge like culture is a very broad term, but we are just focusing on the traditional knowledge. So each culture has important traditional knowledge about the surrounding environment. So language, what is the role of language? if we remove language, so the cultural knowledge would not be expressed, because language is used for the expression of knowledge. And the culture, the specific culture, if you remove the culture, so automatically you also removing the knowledge, the traditional knowledge about the local environment. And if we lose a species, so automatically it will we are also losing part of language, and we are also losing part of culture. So when we are talking about the extinction crisis, so globally and on annual basis, we are losing more, we are losing 11,000 to 36,000 species every year. We are losing 11,000 and to 36 species, and at the same time, we are also losing languages. And it has been estimated and it has been claimed by different researchers that by the end of this century, we will lose about 7,000 languages. And why does this occur? Because the globalization, the modernization, the urbanization, the rapid migration, these are the different factors that are causing like extinction crisis. Of course, globalization has brought remarkable integration, remarkable political integration, economic integration, and social integration. But on the other hand, we can see that in a pluralistic society, when we are living in a pluralistic society, living together, so then we can see that those groups that are in minority, they are losing their language, they are losing their cultures. So because they are adopting the main way of thinking and the main way of behaving, the main way of practicing. So in short, we need to summarize that the three diversities of life that are strictly facing the extinction, the threats that are causing the extinction crisis. So we need to see extinction crisis not just focusing on biodiversity, but at the same time on cultural diversity as well as linguistic diversity. For a more detailed study, you can refer to Yusa Murphy. She is an Italian. She is the founder of Terra Lingua Foundation. I just wanted to give you like a slight glance about that what is happening right now with different diversities of life. Here I am going to show you, because since I spoke about the extinction crisis and I spoke about the erosion of language, the erosion of culture, so I want to discuss and give examples from my research studies. So this is I have focused the northern part of Pakistan during this presentation, because I got publication with these parts that I have carried out during my past, like in 2019 and 2020. So you can see I have investigated different groups, and I have also like highlighted those important groups, like in Gilgit-Baltistan. Basically, I carried out 3 research studies. The first one in Gilgit-Baltistan, where I have completed my research work with the Barusho community, with the Ho community, with Shina and Wahi. And in the second study, I did research with Kalasha, Ho, Kamkatawari, and Yatga. And in the last one, I investigated and compared traditional ecological knowledge and wild food plants between Patan and Urmar. So these were the like different groups that I have investigated in my PhD research work. So since I am talking about cultural and linguistic homogenization or erosion, so just I want to focus like this issue. So these are the results of my published article that I carried out in Gilgit-Baltistan. So here you can see these are the different diagrams, the Venn diagrams. Here we can see I compare different groups if you carefully look at these diagrams, so you can see that remarkable homogenization of traditional knowledge. And you can think that here you are talking about the homogenization of traditional knowledge, and you are relating to cultural and linguistic. Why? Because traditional knowledge is not something that you get from the supermarket or you heard from someone, but it is crucially embedded inside the daily life and inside the daily practices. So we are looking cultural homogenization, the homogenization of different cultural through the lens of traditional knowledge. If you see my cursor, then during this study, I recorded 40 wild food plants and the uses that were commonly shared for those 40 food plants are 29. These are the second Venn diagram on the upper right corner. If you cannot see my cursor, so you can see these are those plants who which were recorded, which were quoted by more than 50% of the participants. So we can see huge homogenization of traditional ecological knowledge. In the same way, we can see the same results in the down Venn diagram on the left side. And also here we can see. So I just wanted to give you a short picture that how cultural and linguistic homogenization is taking place. And one important thing is that we are comparing different groups, and some of the groups, they are very important. For example, if we see in the first diagram, so IB means Burushaski, Ismaili Burushaski. So we divided different groups based on religion and languages. And in total, we investigated 9 groups. So Burushaski is an important linguistic minority. But the other group, the Ho, that I have described in my previous slide, the Ho were they come from another area, and they came as invaders. So they invaded the area and they pushed the first one, the Borosho community, into a very restricted area. So that is why in this area now the language is spoken of Ho, not of Burushaski. So Burushaski, the Borosho community, the linguistic minority, I'm just taking one example, the linguistic minority of Borosho they were the original settlers of the area. And the other community, they arrived from a different region, from Chitral region. They are not the original inhabitants of Gilgit. So they arrived and they forced and they put political pressure on this group. And so during this kind of plural event, so they it's difficult to explain, but when the other group arrived, as in the case of Ho, so they lived and they have been living in a pluralistic society. So different groups are living together, but the major and the dominant group Ho, they are constantly influenced the minority groups like Borosho, like Shina, like Wahi, because they are in minority. And all these groups, so they are following the culture that have been imposed or adopted by the Hu community that arrived as a political invaders. So if we see here, this is another article that I have published. This is in Chitral. So in Chitral, we can see, if we should see the title, Kalasha. Kalasha is an important cultural group in North Pakistan. So they are considered the last pagan tribe of Hindu Kush mountain range, and they are very few thousand in numbers. They are just restricted in 3 valleys. They are very few in thousand. And there is another group, Yadga. The third Nuristani, and Huar. Here, the Kalasha, the case of Kalasha is very important because they have different religion and they have different language. But since they are living together with the Huar community, so they are constantly pressurized by the Huar community. And when they are speaking, so the lingua franca, the language that they use for communication is not Kalasha but Ho. So what happened with Kalasha? So Kalasha, they are losing slowly and slowly their culture. They are losing slowly and slowly their language. And also is the case with Yadga, the second one. Yadga, they are also living together with the Ho. So they are also speaking the language of the dominant cultural group, and also the case of Nuristani. So if you see in both these studies, you can see that the dominant cultural group is Ho, and Ho is constantly affecting the culture and the language. So this cultural and linguistic homogenization we can see when we are talking about traditional ecological knowledge. As I told you already, the traditional ecological knowledge is not just something that you get from the market, but is crucially embedded. It means that if language is affecting, culture is affecting, automatically the traditional ecological knowledge is also affecting. And here we are looking through the lens of traditional ecological knowledge. So, and another important thing is that since Kalasha is like a religious minority, so they are also converting to Islam. Maybe I have no correct answer why, but so they are, when they are converting to Islam. For example, I will quote an example, and then when a girl from the Kalasha community, Kalasha, is going to marry with Yadga, with Nuristani or Huar, so automatically she changes the language because she is not considered Kalasha anymore. So in that case, she is losing the language, she is losing the culture. And we are talking about, we spoke about the pluralism, the effects of pluralism. Since they are living together, we can see the integration, social integration. But on the other hand, the minor cultures are strongly affected by the dominant cultures. So we need to focus on these issues. Here, if we see the area of Waziristan, where I belong to, I carried out this research study among two groups, the Pathans. It is the most like aware ethnic group that is living in north and west Pakistan, and as well as in Afghanistan. So here you can see the same story. Here the two groups, Pathans and Urmur. Urmur is a linguistic minority, although Urmur, they are following the same religion. So we are talking about religion because religion has also great impact on traditional ecological knowledge. That is why we selected language plus religion. So Urmur is a linguistic minority that came from Middle East in 11th century, but and they are living only in the town of Kaniguram. So they are very restricted, just in a village. And they are living together with Pathans. So when they communicate with Pathans, they use Pashto language. Pathan, the language of Pathan, Pashto. So automatically, if you see the younger generation, they are losing their language. And when I was investigating traditional ecological knowledge on plants, I observed that most of the Urmur people, the Urmur, that is the linguistic minority, they were not able even to tell the local names of the wild food plants. And they were able to tell me the names of wild food plants that have been using, or they have used those plants in previous times, but they told me the names in Pashto, not in their own language. So Pathan, the dominant cultural group is Pathan. So Pathan, they are constantly like affecting the linguistic minority of Urmur. So Urmur, they have no specific culture, and now they are losing their language. we use a term linguicide. Linguicide is the killing of language. Since I just try like to extract the concept of cultural and linguistic homogenization from my own studies, although I have focused on food, wild food plants, but I'm just extracting the idea that we should not just stuck to the wild food plants, but we need to go forward and to protect in reality, like the language and culture. If you lose language, then automatically you will lose culture, and you will culture, automatically you are losing ecological knowledge. So if you are losing traditional ecological knowledge, traditional environmental knowledge, so you have seen in the conceptual diagram, there would be like a system collapse. So linguicide, the killing of language. So here you can see Kangas has defined linguicide, and I think she has given so many like factors of linguicide, but I just I just try to concentrate on 2 points. She argued that linguicide occurs when government is not paying attention to a specific linguistic minority. Government is not paying attention to specific language. If government is watching the situation that there are certain threats to language and is not paying attention, then the government is responsible for the linguicide. And sometimes it also occurs that government is directly appoints some agents that are forcing minor groups to speak the dominant language. So I have also somewhere quoted the example, and I was told with some cases from Turkey. So maybe like I was lecturing to Trinare, so we discussed in detail. So just I try like to clarify the concept. So on one side, government is directly involved, and on the other side, government is indirectly involved. So, and we are connecting this to the traditional ecological knowledge, linguistic homogenization, and cultural homogenization. I have written that the 4 words Burusho, Urmar, Kalasha, and Yadra. So we have explained Burusho is minority, important minority groups. Urmar is important minority groups. Kalasha, Yadra. But they are constantly like threatening. Their language is in constant under threat. And government is not paying attention. So we are losing culture. We are losing language. So this was the case I wanted to show you from my case studies, that how pluralism is affecting the culture as well as language. If we talk about the sustainable food system, when I was recording traditional ecological knowledge and wild food plants, so I observed and recorded some places, and you can see Nala. Nala is a place which is considered this reservoir of wild food plants and medicinal plants. So these are the summer pastures, and because so people, they bring their animals in the summer to these nalas, and they graze their animals, and they have immense knowledge on wild food plants and wild medicinal plants. So these are the, if we honor and if we try to make these places as the like points of ecotourism, so Nala could be protected and could be like a bright spot for sustainable food system, because these places, these nalas and summer pastures, they are located at higher elevation. And still, since we can see a remarkable social change everywhere, but the villages that are located at higher elevation are still there. They have still like they are not secure from the food shortage. And I am going to show you with an example of the disaster of Attabad Lake. This is the lake. This was like the area in Gilgit-Baltistan where I carried out my research. So just I want to relate that why we need to promote Nala, to promote summer pastures that are capable to counter the effect of food insecurity. Because in 2010, there was a big landslide in the area, and you can see in the red line, this is the Karakoram highway. This is the highway that links Pakistan to China. So this highway was blocked by a big landslide, and you can see here in the big picture that that was like a river. It was flowing down from the Hunza, from the upper valley into the down areas, was stopped, and the villages that were located at higher elevation were like they were blocked for 6 months. So people were not able to travel down to the down country, and there was a serious food shortage in those areas, and it happened in the month of January in 2010. So you can imagine, if we promote the local food natural resources like wild food plants, then we can counter this kind of the effects of this kind of environmental disasters and hazards. So we can see at the same time, if we promote Nala, we promote culture. If we promote culture, it will also, of course, promote like the protection of biodiversity. So in the area, what are the threats to traditional knowledge? There are different threats like the social change, the vanishing role of Nala. When I am talking about the summer pasture, Nala is a summer pasture. When I am talking about Nala, so there is also like a big threat to the role of Nala, because due to social change, the youngers, they are not staying in Nala. They want to come down, and because like they can see internet, they can see mobile, they can see like television, so they want to come down from Nala, and they want to get education and wants to get involved in business. So the younger generation, they are totally like they don't know about the importance of traditional ecological knowledge, so they are moving towards cities. So the role of Nala is slowly is disappearing. And also, if we see the case of Waziristan, where I belong to, especially because this area has been affected by war and terror, so people have also migrated to cities, and they are detached from the agro-pastoral activities. So the younger, they don't know about their own cultural knowledge. So these are the different like threats. And you can see I have also put some names of the plants. I recorded more than 80 wild food plants, but most of them are already disappeared from the traditional food system. And you can see the name of those different plants. So these are the general threats to the traditional knowledge. These are not only the threats to traditional knowledge, but they are threats to culture. They are also threats to language. So the basic point of today like talk is the conservation, the issue of conservation. See, conservation is a complete like a social process. If we see like the global initiatives that have been taken for the protection of biodiversity, and like the cultural entities and the rights of minorities, we can see the Convention on Biological Diversity that has taken place in 1992. But since 1992, today is 2020, about 30 years ago. But we cannot see useful outcomes of Convention of the Biological Diversity. They have just like formulated some points and some like rules, but the convention has been not successful how to implement the conservation strategies. And then scientists have tried, like the conservation organization that are responsible for the conservation of biodiversity. Three different approaches. So the first one is new conservation science approach. The second one is half earth approach. And the third one, which is very important, and we will discuss biocultural approaches. In new conservation science, the new conservation science is just focusing on the protected areas. I would say that it is not sufficient, and of course is not sufficient, because literature tells us, the results tells us that just focusing on protected areas is not the solution, because the extinction crisis is much more speedy, is more fast. So just focusing on protected areas is not the possible solution. The second one is very interesting, a half earth approach. They, like the champions of this second approach, they argue we need to like leave half of the earth surface to biological diversity, which is not possible, because most of the areas and landscapes that are populated by indigenous and local groups. So what about their rights? What about the land management? So the two, they have also like a contradiction with each other. But scientists argue, like the scientists that are working in ethnobiology, they argue, and they are like right in their argument, that biocultural, if we adopt biocultural approaches, then we can get useful results. Because in biocultural approaches, what we do, because in biocultural approach, we are not just focusing like we are not just involving scientists or like international organizations, but at the same time we are also taking into account the local communities, because local communities that they are residing, they are populating the area, they know better about the environment. So what the biocultural approach is involving all the stakeholders, because everyone has different viewpoints on environment. So this is the more beneficial approach which we need to implement, because biocultural approach is generally use traditional ecological knowledge to counter and to combat the extinction crisis. I will just quote an example of Pakhtunwali. Pakhtunwali is a term which is used for the Pathan code of life is called Pakhtunwali. I am Pathan. So in Pakhtunwali, what we do, this is like a packet. Pakhtunwali is a packet of different social characteristics. So we have a jirga system, a local council. Local council, we have a local council which is called jirga. So that local council is responsible for different social activities, for different like for dealing with different social and ecological problems. In that we also can see that local people have also certain rules, regulation, and customary laws how to protect forests, how to protect the natural resources, and all the like the Pathans that are following the jirga, they would oblige, and they are obliged to follow the customary laws. The customary laws that have been built for the protection of natural resources. I'm just like taking the laws relating the Pakhtunwali, just extracting those laws which are crucially and exclusively related to the protection of the local flora, local natural resources, because the local people, they know about the area, they know about the plants, they know about the management of ecosystem. So if we take the service of a local council, of course we can produce better results, and this approach is called biocultural approach. So we are just like we are near to conclude. Traditional ecological knowledge and its revitalization through possible strategies and educational platform. See, since we can see a lot of literature that traditional ecological knowledge has been documented, but just the documentation is not the possible solution. We need to go forward. So that's why I'm also focusing that how we can bring this knowledge into the actual classroom, practices to involve the local communities. So what I will do, I will go to the area and then I will bring the local communities to schools, and then we will try to gather and make a syllabus and curriculum based on their experience, like sitting together with teachers, with students, with local communities, with scientists, and then policymakers, with educationalists. We have to involve all together, because we cannot protect biodiversity, we cannot protect culture, we cannot protect language just like focusing scientific points and then ignoring all those which are purely connected to a community, because conservation is a social process. If you are not involving the local communities, you are just like planning for the protection of an area and you are not thinking about those people that are living in that specific area. You are excluding them, so it is not fruitful, it is not useful conservation effort. So that's why I'm trying to how to like bring this knowledge into the educational later form, because we also argue that it will not only protect the biodiversity and revive the culture, revive the language, but it will be very beneficial for the social sustainability, like social cohesion, because different communities, they are living together. So to live together, they need to be live with harmony, because they have different religions, they have different language. So social cohesion is like very important, that keeps together all the components of a society. So these are the concluding remarks of my short conference. If giving space to traditional ecological knowledge inside conservation projects will provide incentives to protect the local biodiversity, while the celebration of their cultural knowledge inside educational programs could be a possible incentive to pay attention to local culture and language. And if someone wants to search about, like to read literature, so I have put some references, so then you can study later. These are these are very important. This is an important substance, like you need to focus. So also it also like includes my 2 research article. So that was all about my presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I find it very interesting, and I think also students, because you have a question from a student in the chat. But I want to stress the concept that you show very well, of the connection, of the link between language and biodiversity. Then it's biodiversity, also linguistic biodiversity. And I wonder if there are also some risk of in this biodiversity, because when you see the other, the different in general, you have also the risk. I don't want to say racism, but biodiversity has also some consequences that are a problem. I think there is men has to keep attention also to risk of excess of cultural biodiversity. And I ask your opinion about it.
Yes, so actually in my studies we just focused like minority groups, because they are like suffering more. For example, if we see like the different, I have given the example of Kalasha. So Kalasha is a minority group just living in three valleys, in North Pakistan. So we have just focused on minority groups. Otherwise, there is a problem when we are living in a pluralistic society, different languages, different cultures. So it happens automatically. It happens. We cannot prevent. But the most like the victims that have been like mostly victimized are the minority groups. I'm not talking about myself that I am in Italy, so I am losing my language. No, because I have a strong culture behind. So basically, I'm not losing my culture. I have a strong culture.
Yes.
In Pakistan, that culture is not like in minority. So in that sense, we are talking about they are like the local population, but they are in minority. Otherwise, this is like very, because when we are living in a pluralistic society, we need like to live in integration, social integration. We need political integration, as I discussed. So we cannot prevent these issues. For example, I am in Italy. I have to speak Italian. So it does not mean that I have like forget. I do forget my own language. No, because in that area, in my local area, in my own country, I am not a minority group. We are just focusing the minorities that are in real, they are minors in real sense, in their own areas. So I think I understand.
Yes.
I don't.
Yes, thank you. Then we have a question of Chiara Gasperini. I don't know if you can see it in the chat.
Yes, I can see. Thank you so much. It was. Yes, this is like a related question, but it's not much more about the dialect. For example, in Pathan, in my own, like in Pakistan, we have different dialects. But at least you have different dialects, but language, we are just taking language. Of course, dialects are changing. And we cannot completely stop the change in language. In the same way, as I discussed, the traditional ecological knowledge is mutating, changes with the time and space. We cannot prevent, we cannot stop to transfer that knowledge in the same composition, in the same structure, because it adjusts itself according to the social and ecological conditions. So changing dialects, we cannot prevent them. But here we are just concerned. So Italy is a country. So Italian in Italy, they are not in minority. If you are talking about dialect, so I think we cannot say that this dialect is in minor and this dialect is in major. So I am not like a linguist. I would not be able like to respond, because since I am ethnobotanist, but just like touch this.
Yes.
Any other question? I think I was simple. I tried like to make it simple, because it's my PhD work was not like easy to simplify it.
Yes, I think you make it simple, but it's not simple at all.
No, it's not simple, because the diagram that I have put in the slides, they are very complicated. I can see, because I was not able to come down and talk on the level that these master students have their comprehension.
Any other question?
That is an important question, relevant questions. Yes. Actually, in ethnobiology, when we are talking about traditional knowledge or local knowledge. So in ethnobiology, we follow some standards, we follow some rules. For example, if you go to an area, you record the knowledge. You go to an area and you record the traditional knowledge. And the locals, they are thinking about benefits. So then there are two possibilities. If you are selling the knowledge, commercializing the knowledge, then of course these people have the right to raise their voice, to claim for economic benefits, because you are also getting money on behalf of their intellectual properties. But since we are not involved in commercialization of knowledge, on one hand, if they are giving us knowledge, on the other hand, we are protecting their cultural knowledge or cultural entity that is eroding. So there is a like mutualistic relationship between researchers and the local communities. Researchers, they protect their knowledge, they document their knowledge. But if researchers go forward and commercialize the knowledge, then you have the right to get economic benefits. I think this is very simple, but that question is very important. And if we like the commercialization of the knowledge, so this is very like complicated matter of intellectual property. So still, international community, international organizations, UNESCO, Biological Convention, these different, they have no like common concept, consent how to give feedback, how to get them benefit of their local knowledge, that they are sharing their knowledge. But for example, if like Burusho, that is like minority group, is losing culture, and I am protecting their cultural knowledge. If I'm not protecting their cultural, they will lose the knowledge. But if I go forward and sell the knowledge, then it's their right to claim. I think my answer is very simple. Khalid Mahmood, thank you so much. You asked a very beautiful question. Because in ethnobiology, when we go to an area, first of all, we get the consent of the person, of the participant, whether you want to share your knowledge or not. If you do not want to share your knowledge, because we are just, we have to make it clear for each of the participant that we just like record the knowledge. We are not using for for commercial purposes. And then all these participants were agreed upon that we are going to share the knowledge. We are happy. And on the other hand, I am trying like to get their knowledge to schools. And it will like include the part of the language, because there are certain communities like in Brazil, we can see different studies. Different people have like different languages and different classification of their environment. So we need to consider the linguistic contribution in traditional ecological knowledge. So we try to get this knowledge into the actual classroom practices. So it would be cultural revival, it would be linguistic revival, it would be like traditional ecological revival. So like it is a complex process. We need to get together and fight together. Just scientists, ethnobotanists, ethnobiologists, they cannot do anything. We are just proposing solutions. Just proposing solutions. Because I am not the local residents of the area. I cannot stay over there like to stop the people, please don't destroy the biodiversity. I cannot like remain in that area. What I can do, I have to involve them, to give them incentives. Then they will like focus on the protection of biodiversity, which will be a ground for the cultural revival and for the language revival. And they will feel that about the honor and privilege of their culture and their language.
Yes, and I think that this idea of education, stressing the importance of education, is also the idea of to create an heritage to young people and young generations.
Yes, because if you bring the knowledge in educational platforms, they will automatically pay attention because it will be part of the curriculum. So if they do not want to revive their culture and language or traditional ecological knowledge, but they will follow the curriculum, they will be like in some way they will be forced to follow your like the knowledge, like in a contextual knowledge. We can say what a contextual knowledge, which is very important, because our schoolings and our school system are not like contextualized. So most of the time student cannot define very basic things. They cannot like interpret very basic concepts, because we are sitting in Pakistan and we are talking about America. So education does not mean like to go. Education means like something that is more, you know, beneficial. Just.
Yes, it's true. Any question?
I think there is no question. So everyone like understands, and I am very happy.
But I think that I don't have yes. But I think that students that have some questions later can write to you.
Yes, of course. They can write.
You can find the email of Mohammed in our website.
Yes, I have also put in the start slide. They can see my email.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, then I think that he will be happy to answer to other questions.
Sure, of course.
Thanks a lot to you and to everybody, and see you soon in Pollenzo, I hope.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone, and good evening or good night. Bye. Ciao. See you.
Thank you. Ciao.
Ciao.